each. Mr. Perkins, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Morgan, for coming today. Have you, as an acting board member, I think that's the correct title of SDTC, have you had any meetings since you've been appointed to this position with the Minister of Industry or his office?
No, we have not.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to talk a bit about the review of the projects that's ongoing. It's one of your 3 areas. You mentioned that you're reviewing the projects identified for the Auditor General for eligibility. Has he, to your knowledge, has the Auditor General been back at all at SDTC looking at a broader list of transactions rather than just the 226 she looked at?
No, not to my knowledge.
She hasn't. So the Auditor General's then report stands, which was during the audit period, that she reviewed 226 of 420 transactions approved by the board.
That's correct, and one of her recommendations was that we review individually each of the projects that was undertaken during that audit period, and that is what we have. That is a process that we have started.
You're focused on the 226 transactions that were that were mentioned and discussed in the audit, not the 420 in the audit period?
We are focused on all of the projects that were put in place during the period of the audit. So I believe that the Auditor General took a sample of projects and reviewed them, but we are reviewing all of those projects, all of the projects.
Right. So that, yes. According to the Auditor General's report, that's 420 projects. So you're reviewing them all for eligibility? For
eligibility, yes, as per the recommendation of the Auditor General.
And when you look at the eligibility, besides the, I'm presuming you're talking about eligibility relative to the contribution agreements.
Yes, that's correct.
Are you looking at eligibility relative to conflict of interest?
We're looking at eligibility. We're following the Auditor General's recommendation, which was to review every project for eligibility, and we have hired independent firms to assess. 2 individuals, independent, will assess each project for eligibility, and that's per the Auditor General's recommendation.
That's true, but as a person overseeing the governance of this organization, I would think that you would be more concerned overall, not just with the eligibility, but the overall issues that have been identified in the culture of conflict of interest in the organization, at the board and in management, and most of those management are still there. In the culture of conflict of interest, the 226 projects that the Auditor General audited out of the 420, 82% of them were conflicted. 82% of board member approved transactions were conflicted by board members. To me, that goes to an eligibility issue as well, because there is no way those 9 directors represented 82% of the clean technology community in Canada. So are you explaining to me that the board and the review that's going on with the third party isn't delving into the issue at all of the conflicts of interest that were identified, and whether or not these companies got preferential treatment because of their connection with board members? That's not part of the review?
Mr. Chair, a number of the recommendations of the Auditor General were related to strengthening the conflict of interest provisions of SDTC, and those recommendations have been implemented. The board is overseeing the governance of SDTC, and we're doing that with much strengthened conflict of interest reporting provisions going forward. In terms of the eligibility reviews, we're following the advice of the Auditor General, which is to review each project for eligibility.
But the whole reason we're here, and the whole reason we have a production of documents motion that got approved by the majority of the House of Commons members of Parliament to be collected, unredacted, is that in that audit period, those 420 transactions approved by board members, that represents $856 million of taxpayer money. The Auditor General only looked at half of that and found 330 million was conflicted and 59 million was ineligible. That's almost 400 million of 800 million was conflicted or spent incorrectly. So it boggles my mind that in trying to clean up the governance that the minister said was his goal with transferring it, getting rid of the board, having a new board, that part of that process is saying, look, folks, these projects have a problem. They are conflicted. These board members, like, the project may be legitimate, but how they got in and how they got funding was clearly preferential treatment over that of other businesses in the clean technology space that didn't get funding. And for that not to be part of the review boggles my mind. So will you commit here that you will mandate to that third party that you have doing it to ensure that conflict of interest, which was a big part of the Auditor General's report, is part of your review?
Mr. Chair, we have independent advice on conflict of interest and provisions of the SDTC. And as we go forward, we will be taking advice on conflict of interest issues as well, particularly as we look at reviews and as we look at restarting funding for projects.
Thank you very much. Turning out to